Welcome to the Enlightened Empath with Sara Weiss, founder and director of SpiritHeal Institute. Sara is a medical intuitive and spiritual teacher, and she has created the Enlightened Empath Training program. Today we're going to talk about that program and about the empath's challenges and opportunities in life. I'm Ken Weiss, host and husband of Sara. Sara, tell us a little about your classes.
The main program that I offer is called the Enlightened Empath Training. It's a year-long program, and it has 2 levels at this point. It's got the beginning level and the advanced level. I also do coaching, individual coaching for empaths, and I have occasional introduction to the basics of being an empath classes. The classes I teach are done via teleconference, and my individual sessions are also done over the phone. So I work with people all over the world, and people who are in the classes are from a wide geographic area.
So in your empath training, what are some of the methods or approaches you use?
The program is very, very unique because we are working from a very spiritual perspective. The first modality of the training is the establishment of a sacred circle. This is a very mystical process, and maybe, just maybe, you can resonate with this when you sense how maybe groups of spiritual people have gathered in monasteries, or women who have gathered in the forests as herbalists and earth mystics. There has always been in the mystical world a type of circle that invokes a greater unified light and wisdom. And so every session that takes place in the Enlightened Empath Training is within this sacred context. And this sacred context gives you access to the frequency of higher wisdom, of high frequency, very refined light energy. And when an empath feels this resonance from a unified field of human beings, each grounded in their higher nature and their higher being, they finally feel at home. They need these high frequency, beautiful energies to feed their heart, to feed their soul. And then it can make sense to them to express their individuality, because it is connected to these higher realms of consciousness. If an empath doesn't feel that connection to the higher realm of consciousness, being a separate individual does not make sense. They have no context. It literally, it just like is a total mismatch. They cannot figure out how to be a human being unless they are embraced in the unified field, the refined light of the divine, the arms of Mother Earth that hold us in the consciousness of love. And then they can grow and develop their individuality. And this sacred circle translates into a boundary, a living, shimmering boundary that's very intelligent and very wise, that they take with them into their life. And it helps with their discernment. It helps with their protection. It helps them reconnect to something that is so essential to their soul that they can finally make sense of living an earth life. Not only do they make sense of it, but they begin to relish it, because they understand that the consciousness of Mother Earth has the love that matches the type of love that they feel naturally. So there's a resonance with the earth and an understanding that we're here to experience this very palpable, universal love in an earth body. It finally makes sense to them.
So that's the sacred circle. That's very important. What else is involved in the Enlightened Empath Training?
Well, once they have the context of the sacred circle, then the first couple months of the training is actually going through a healing process. They need to heal the wounds of having been misunderstood and misunderstanding themselves. And so I teach several healing modalities to help them reclaim their energy, reclaim their brightness and their lightness. We do several grounding types of exercises. We learn the difference between being empathic, intuitive, and telepathic, and start to sort out the differences in the subtle energy realms. We also have the Enlightened Empath Journal, and it's a series of 70 prompts to journal your experience as an empath. And it's important for empaths to give words to their feelings and their experiences. One of the things that has been shut down in a lot of empaths is the ability to find the words for their experience. Because if you're feeling a different emotion every couple minutes, you're going to lose confidence in trying to express those feelings. If you don't know what your feelings are because you've become overwhelmed and flooded with so many different feelings and sensations, then you're almost made into a mute. You just cannot find the words. So the journaling is an important part of this process. Writing, getting the words that you need to express yourself, and feeling like it's okay to say what you need to say. So at first there's a lot of whining, a lot of anger coming out, a lot of confusion. And as they begin to write more and more in the journal, they start to straighten out their ability to express verbally what they've experienced in their life. And that's coupled with being in a circle with other people who have had the same experience, so they're not feeling so strange or odd. Then the second modality we use is transmission. So every class is conducted within the sacred circle where we are embraced by the higher frequencies, the ascended masters, the angelic beings, the light beings, the full wisdom of the cosmos. And this is pouring down upon us as we are sitting together in our class. And I will channel a certain topic for each class. And within that channeling, and it's not typical channeling, I'm very aware, I know what I'm saying. What I'm really doing is channeling the light language of these higher frequencies. And then at a certain point, the energies come together and shower a transmission of very refined wisdom and knowledge through frequency and vibration into our beings, and activates, like creating an enzymatic action within our consciousness and within our being that enables us to see the higher form of our being, to seed the growth and wisdom that we need as empaths to be able to move out of being personally entangled with everything and everyone around our lives and being brought into a coherent whole within ourselves. Now, every class has this transmission, and throughout the year, these transmissions are activating the truth and the knowledge within us. And that's why this training takes a year, because these transmissions are very, very powerful, and you need a month in between each class to digest and integrate the transmissions. So there's a sacred circle, and then there's the transmission, then there's the teaching on a different topic or several topics. Then we have discussion and question and answer. And in the discussion, people get to raise their questions, ask for help if they're stuck at a certain place in their being or in their energy practice that they have not been able to move through or understand. And we have a very deep, kind, beautiful discussion. This is very healing. And again, this is all taking place within the light temple of our being, within our hearts. And then we have the manual that I've written for the class, and we have a journal that I've written for the class. So the manual and the journal support the information that's transmitted each class session. And then the last method is the discussion page that we have on the website that is strictly for the members of the class, where they can put up their insights, ask their questions, and dialogue among the group in between each session. So that is the complete program for the Enlightened Empath Training. I would like to note that I call it the Enlightened Empath Program. And the reason I call it the Enlightened Empath Program is because empaths are coming from this place of oneness. Now, of course, we are not all enlightened beings, but the potential for becoming enlightened is very strongly there for empaths. They are already in a state of oneness, which is what enlightenment is. And they have to figure out the earthly part of this. A lot of people are starting in the earthly part and striving for the spiritual. But the empath is working it from a different direction, where they're already in a state of oneness and have to figure out how to be human. So just a note about why it's called the Enlightened Empath class.
You mentioned that during each class you cover a topic. What types of topics do you talk about?
Well, in the first level, we work multidimensionally. So even though I have an outline and a manual, I always leave room for and space for the guidance that wants to come in during that class. But basically, in the first year of the program, we go through a period of healing past wounds, of retrieving energy and fragments back from places we've left it in multidimensional spaces and in this lifetime. We learn how to bring power back to ourselves and to embrace the idea of what an empath actually is and why your life has gone the way it's gone.
What topics do you cover in your classes?
For instance, in the very first class, we have an introduction to what is an empath, what type of empath you are, identifying with the idea that you're an empath, and taking a look from the point you're at right now at your entire life and how being an empath created the life that you lived. So there's a lot of healing that needs to occur when you first discover and understand that you're an empath. And there's a lot of soul retrieval and power to regain and a self-identity that includes your multidimensional consciousness. So the other topic we covered, this was all in the very first class, is the necessity for being sourced by higher frequency energies. An empath absolutely resonates with very high refined energies. Life only makes sense and organizes itself around very high frequency energies. And if you have been an empath that has not had these energies available to you throughout your lifetime, it is very eye-opening and a relief to find out that there is a type of frequency that feels like home to you. So this is what's covered in the very first class. And then we have a transmission that helps free all the entanglements from your past and the life you've lived until now. And then in other classes, we discuss very practical things like your relationships, how to center and ground in the midst of being overwhelmed, how to learn how to communicate what you truly feel and not just tell someone what they want to hear, how to separate and identify yourself as an individual and feel comfortable about that, understanding grounded and ungrounded energies, how to deal with negativity and low self-esteem, things like this go into the very beginning of the training.
Boy, I'd like to know what you continue with. Can you tell us what other skills you teach to help empaths live their lives fruitfully and successfully?
One of the necessities is learning how to navigate boundaries. And this is going to be a little longer discussion because it takes up many of the modules. It's always a piece of every module that we're working with. So empaths don't understand boundaries. When you're born with a sense of oneness, boundaries don't make sense. So you have to find a way that boundaries do make sense because you're living on Earth, and Earth life has boundaries. Things have definition. They are clearly individual at a certain level. And so the way we approach learning about boundaries is about communicating with Mother Earth. And I'm going to come around to this as briefly as I can, but it's important for the explanation here. The Great Mother, the Great Feminine Mother of creation, has embodied herself within planet Earth. She is on a journey of embodiment the same way we are on a journey of embodiment. But she hasn't forgotten her source. She hasn't forgotten who she is as a luminous being in pure consciousness like we have. And so when we connect with Mother Earth and take her on as our teacher, as our mother, we can learn about boundaries in a way that makes absolute sense to an empath. So the type of boundaries that Mother Earth teaches us about are living, permeable membranes. Everything that has to do with the living earth is permeable, is a membrane, and is exchanging living energies with its environment and everyone else around them. So when you say the word boundary to an empath, that implies something very rigid, more like a wall that boxes you in rather than a membrane that connects you to the entire matrix of life. So this is where we begin our teaching on boundaries with empaths. And that really takes up a lot of the first year program. But by the time we're done, after a year, people really understand how to have a boundary without limiting themselves and also maintaining their connection to their multidimensional being. They haven't boxed themselves in, haven't lost their sense of oneness. Instead, they feel the intelligence of the nested realities and different dimensions that our consciousness exists in. And Earth dimension is one of them. And so taking on the qualities of a living permeable membrane while we're on the Earth dimension absolutely makes sense to an empath and does help them feel protected, supported, connected to the greater intelligence and wisdom without being limited.
When people are in relationships, I imagine boundaries are difficult to form and keep. How does one keep their boundaries in a close relationship, with a spouse, for instance?
Well, that's pretty tricky and probably pretty messy for empaths who have not become skilled. It gets very confusing and very painful in many ways. As a medical intuitive, for example, I might have someone come into my practice who has all kinds of symptoms. Maybe they're anxious, and maybe their left hip hurts, and maybe they feel depressed and confused about their life. And one of the first things I ask is, if they're in a long-term relationship or a marriage, does their partner have any of these symptoms? And very often, the empath is expressing the symptoms of the partner. And if you have two depressed people in a relationship, that's not going to go well. If you have two people who can't walk because their knees hurt, that's not going to go well. It gets very, very confusing. And empaths need a lot of downtime. And when they're put in a situation where they're with someone all the time, or they have a lot of family obligations, and they can't get the downtime to separate out their energy from the other people, it gets very frustrating. And it really causes problems in the relationship. So any empath that's in a relationship needs a lot of downtime. They need to be given that downtime generously without being made to feel guilty about it, because in the end, the relationship will be much healthier. It's a lot to take in for someone who's in a relationship with an empath. The other side of that, though, is you are never going to be loved as deeply and beautifully as you'll be loved by an empath. You will also be well understood, deeply understood by an empath. So there's trade-offs that occur in being in relationship with empaths. Sometimes empaths can't sleep in the same bed as their partner or even the same room because they need that downtime and the separation from the stimulation of just even the near presence of another person. But there's creative ways to get around that. And even Judith Orloff in her book talks about how her relationships always ended because she needed more downtime than her partners wanted to give her. And she even said, I prefer to live in my own place and have them live in another place because I need that much space. And so navigating that type of need requires a lot of understanding from an empath's partner.
So what can a student expect from the more advanced classes that you give?
The more advanced classes bring the students into a place that I call living their higher consciousness. So when you're an empath and you're aware of this oneness and you sense these higher frequencies and beautiful ways of being in love with all and everyone, and yet you haven't learned to be skillful so that you get dragged down and start living in lower frequency energies that don't support your higher ideals, then you're not living your higher consciousness. The goal of the advanced training is to pave the pathway so that empaths can begin living their day-to-day lives from their higher consciousness. So the main teaching in the advanced level is learning how to live your everyday life in your higher consciousness.
Can you tell us any success stories about empaths who had difficulties and overcame them?
Oh, lots of them. We've had lots of successful growth and evolution through the Enlightened Empath program. People who were on the verge of divorce because they didn't think they could handle staying married learned how to take the time, how to ground their energy, how to clear their energy, and build their boundaries so that they could be in a healthy relationship. We've had lawyers who were so exhausted and getting sick with cancer and different kinds of serious diseases learn how to reinforce their boundaries, build their energy every day, take care of themselves, and re-engage in a successful law practice. Doctors who didn't think they could see one more patient, learning how to draw the boundaries between themselves and their patients so that they didn't feel every single thing that their patient felt. Can you imagine being an empath and being a doctor? It's very, very difficult. And I've had a lot of clients who are physicians that are empaths. And they need to learn how to translate and then depersonalize the experiences that they're having within their own body and place them back with the patient, consciously separating themselves off. People who were depressed and anxious, particularly depressed if they felt like, what is wrong with me? The sense of being wrong and bad can be very pervasive in the empath's consciousness because they just haven't been acknowledged and recognized. And so a deep depression can arise. And we've had people be able to evolve out of that depression and find a way to be happy and joyful in their life, recognizing that with discernment, they can separate out from anything that's around them and reground into their true being.
Tell us about some of the retreats you hold for empaths.
I have the Enlightened Empath Retreat, and I've just begun those. The first one was in November of 2018. The next one is coming up in June of 2019. They take place in Silver City, New Mexico at a beautiful lodge on 180 acres of magical New Mexican land. And I actually picked this place. I selected it very purposefully for the Empath Retreat because the nature spirits there, the land, it's filled with great, great spiritual wisdom. And it's very, very quiet. It's an atmosphere where the empath can go and their nervous system can actually rest. And it's a 5-day retreat where we alternate between meditation and energy work, question and answers, feedback that I give to the participants when they're having particular struggles or they can't understand what's happening. I'm able in that context to devote time that addresses individual concerns. We also visit some sacred sites. We're nourished by incredibly beautiful organic food that can be adapted for any food plan that someone is on. That's another issue that empaths have. They can have a lot of food allergies and sensitivities, a lot of inflammation issues. So this site in New Mexico is a cushion for an empath to land and then be able to do some very deep mystical work with themselves and also do some deep healing.
I've been on your retreats and they're well worth it. Sara, tell us a little about yourself in the time we have remaining.
I would love for people to check out the information that's on my website. I've been working as a medical intuitive and spiritual guide for 40 plus years. I am a teacher in 3 different mystical paths, and I've combined the wisdom of these paths into a unique and very grounded way of working with people. On my website, I have several blogs about the life of an empath. There's some free audio recordings on the website, and I'm not the kind of person that is out there having you sign up for a free course on this so that I can lead you into buying a more expensive course or a lot of marketing type outreach. I reach people in a more mystical way. There is a transmission that comes through me that seems to find the people that I need to connect with. So I invite you to check out the website, which is SpiritHealOnline.com, and see if there's something there that calls you to connect, and then drop me a line.
That is SpiritHealOnline.com, correct?
Right, spelled SpiritHeal, online, ONLINE, one word.com.
Listeners can learn more about your Enlightened Empath Training program, sign up for teleclasses, retreats, or individual counseling sessions by going to your website, SpiritHealOnline.com. This has been the Enlightened Empath with Sara Weiss. Thanks, Sara.